K&S Plumber.
Hey, I was wondering if you can come by my house and snake out my kitchen drain. One thing though, I don't have any money, but I could give you a shout out on Instagram.
Shout this. No.
No?
No. I can't eat thank yous. My
Very
kids
true.
got to eat food. Sorry. If you want me to come snake it out, I'll do it, but it's $200 to show up.
The age old working for exposure. When I was first starting out, I fell for this many times, more than I care to admit, but sometimes it does actually work out in your favor. But most, and I mean 8 or 9 times out of 10, it does not, and it is a complete dumpster fire. I've been offered hundreds of work for exposure jobs over the years, and I've learned the difference between working for exposure and just straight up manipulation. I've noticed a lot of creators, especially ones that are just starting out, they don't really have a grasp on whether a job would be a dream or a nightmare until it's too late. Starting out with what I would consider working for exposure not to be, working for exposure is different than just making a video for a family member or friend for free. That's totally okay, and I've done plenty of free things for family and friends over the years, but this is more of a learning exercise and getting your creative reps in than it is for working for exposure. Unless your friend or family member has a ton of connections that you can use and they can give you more work. But most likely this will probably lead nowhere, but you are helping someone out that you have a relationship, and it's the nice and right thing to do if you have the time to do so. So not saying don't do these projects, but don't get them confused as a work for exposure project versus just helping someone out. In my point of view, working for exposure means that you're doing something for someone and they will be opening doors for you to meet new people or be exposed to new markets that you wouldn't have access to without them. So with all that doom and gloom out of the way, let's get into some positive working for exposure. And this is especially true if you're new or inexperienced. And this is just a great way to build your confidence as a creator and build your portfolio at the same time. The promise of building a portfolio, in my experience, is how most people come with you to work for exposure. But if that's the only thing they're promising, this typically won't lead anywhere other than a portfolio piece if you're lucky. If you already have a well-rounded portfolio already, please, by all means, do not take this job because you're working for free and you don't actually need that as a portfolio piece to begin with. This usually, in my experience, is the worst kind of a client because I don't need the project. They're getting something for free. And if you really don't have any skin in the game in a project, either on the creator or the client side, it really doesn't make for a great, clear project with a defined goal and endpoint. However, if you're a new creator or you need to upgrade your reel, this is a great way to just get some really quick work done, but make sure there is a goal and an end date to the free work. Just make sure it's a good fit before you accept any projects. Which brings me to one negative, and that is opportunity costs. If you take a job that isn't paying you, and then suddenly you find a job that is paying you, but you're already booked for an unpaid gig, it's going to sting a little bit, and you're going to have the overwhelming urge to drop the non-paying client and take the paying client. It makes sense, right? But this could actually do more damage to your name if you have agreed to do a project for a client and then back out. You can get a bad reputation, especially if you're in a smaller town. If you're in, New York City or LA, you can probably get away with this a little easier, and people are probably conditioned to expect that. But if you're in a small town, word travels quickly. So if you're accepting a job, make sure to follow it through, even if it's a job that you could find something better in the future. Maybe that person tells someone else that, yeah, this person was going to do a project with me, but then they bailed at the last second. That is a very bad reputation to have because those people talk to each other. And in a small market, like I said, it can take one project to completely ruin your name. If your name does come up, the opportunity costs of taking non-paying work, make sure you know what you're actually signing up for before you do it. I'm not trying to steer you away from working for exposure. A great plus for working for exposure is that you do get to meet new people, and sometimes you can have a client open the door for meeting new people or being exposed to new markets that you wouldn't be otherwise having without that client. Networking is one of the most underrated sides of business, and if you put yourself out there and meet new people, and assuming you do good work, you'll eventually get a call for jobs. But if you don't make those connections and people don't know who you are, they're never going to be on your radar, or you won't be on their radar. So you won't just get that work naturally. You'll have to always be going out and trying to find work. So networking and creating good relationships with people will open many doors for you, and doing good work, obviously. But as good as networking and the promise of meeting people is, be careful they aren't just telling you that to get you interested. I've been promised that I'll meet new people and other creators and be exposed to new markets, or like car dealerships that need car videos every week, or the list just goes on and on. When you get there and you are expected to do a job, you can't treat it as a networking event. Maybe you don't even get a chance to meet the people that you were talking to while you were interviewing them, for example. Or maybe they just don't even show up, and now you're stuck with no connections. And this has happened to me before, more times than I care to admit. But always make sure that the people that they're promising to introduce you to and expose you to new markets actually will happen. And do a little bit of research here and make sure that this is actually somewhere that you want to go and you want to be doing this project. On a higher note, working for exposure is a great chance to learn new techniques and try them out with somewhat little to no risk. If you're not used to using a gimbal or a Steadicam but have always wanted to try one for a shoot, it's a great introductory or test project that you can use for a new piece of gear or a new technique. Working out the kinks of new tech or filming on a non-paying project will probably not yield you a ton of portfolio pieces, but it is great that will transfer over to your paying clients. And whenever you can show a piece that says, hey, this new client, I can use a Steadicam or a gimbal, or I know this new editing technique, and here's a piece of content with me doing that thing, you'll probably get paid more to do that thing for the next client. So if you think about leveraging unpaying clients to learn new techniques, then it actually makes your future clients, one, it makes you more profitable because you're doing roughly the same amount of work, but you're just doing it better, so you can charge more. And the client loves it because they're getting a better product. So leveraging little tiny projects to level up your skills over time will actually make you a significantly better filmmaker than if you just didn't do any of those projects before, didn't take any risks, and you just relied on your paying gigs to do new stuff. Because honestly, when it comes to bigger paying projects, I don't want to try new things. I want to do the tried and true methods that I know will deliver results, unless it's a more creative client that's okay with taking some risks. Most times, clients see something that you made and they're like, I want you to make that for me. So it's hard to try new things when you're always just working on paid clients. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but working with little to no risk, trying something new with a new client will only help you in your future. So it's a good investment if you think of it that way. This is currently my technique when I test out new gear for my YouTube channel. It's always something very new to me, so I'll often find a little small project that is little to no money, and I can get done in about an afternoon and test out some new techniques and equipment. I wouldn't accept a large project for this, but smaller projects with fast turnaround times are great ways to kind of jump in and use something in a real world scenario quickly. Now for one of the biggest and worst parts of working for exposure, and unfortunately this happens way too often. And it's when companies that are profitable are exploiting creators to work for free with the promise of exposure. But at the end of the day, exposure doesn't pay your bills. If a company reaches out to you and they have huge profits coming in, they need to pay you. Please don't make the mistake and accept these jobs and just think that it's okay that companies with budgets for marketing and hiring new employees and having a new ping pong table at their, latest office is a good excuse for you to come in and work for exposure, because these companies are profitable, they have a budget, and they need to pay you. Even if you're a new creator, you need to realize that your services that you are doing are worth something. Even if they're worth a little bit and you're prorating something, a little bit is worth more than working for exposure, because at that point the company has some skin in the game and they will treat you like a real client. I've learned this lesson the hard way a few times before, and these are always the clients that are not only exploiting and manipulating you for free or heavily discounted work, but they will be the worst clients you'll ever have. They do not value your time since you're working for free. They're going to leave you waiting around on the shoot day, and they are always the ones that will micromanage you the most for some reason. You'll always have tons of revisions because they are technically not paying for anything. You're doing it all for free. So they're going to be very willing to nitpick every little thing, even if it is a technically proficient video. They have no risk of saying, well, what about this change? What about that change? What if we did this? What if we did that? Because they're not actually paying for those revisions. I could be making an entire video going over this one, but over the years, I've learned that if a company has money to spend on employees and equipment, they have enough to spend on marketing, and they should be compensating you for your skills fairly. One of the key takeaways here is work for exposure should be a win-win for both parties. You should walk away from work from exposure projects with having a skill, a connection, or a future lead on a video, and the client should have a nice deliverable that they can show off. Sometimes that deliverable will generate you more work or expose your name to people, but I shouldn't walk into something thinking I'm going to be taken advantage of, because that's a really terrible feeling, and if you think that, you're not going to be doing your best work. If you're good at your craft, you deserve to be paid for it. Doctors, lawyers, electricians, plumbers, landscapers do not work for exposure, so why should you? I dare you to try to call up a plumber and say, hey, my drain's clogged, can you come over? I'll give you a shout out on Instagram. It'll be great exposure. You'll get all kinds of clients. Not all unpaid gigs are bad, but it depends on the client. My absolute favorite work for exposure clients are someone that's just starting a business, a nonprofit, a community project, or a school. Usually these people don't have big budgets or any budgets at all, but they are hungry to make a name for themselves, so you can actually trust them to introduce you to people or introduce you to new markets, or it's a good foot in the door moment, but it should be a fair project for both people. This video is a little more different than my typical tech gear review videos. If you like this style of video, let me know in the comments down below. Working for exposure can be great. Don't let me dissuade you from doing it. I still do it all the time, but you have to be very choosy with your clients. Thank you guys for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.